Economics of Disunity: Why Africans in the Diaspora Struggle to Build Collective Wealth. So this is one discussion that I think is timely and we should be having as economists in this diaspora policy immigration period. So the African diaspora sends home billions every year, yet our collective wealth barely grows, while other immigrant communities build global business networks and capital power. Many Africans abroad still operate in economic isolation. So today, we will unpack the real number behind this and the heavy cost of this disunity amongst Africans. So let's look at the economic side of things first before we go. But I am Dr. Dide Adewale and welcome to my channel where economics meets global affairs. In this episode, we will look at the data on diaspora wealth, the remittances and community investments, and how the absence of organized support networks amongst Africans abroad has a long-term economic consequences. So you see this thing of, ignore your brother, avoid, Nigerians, avoid your fellow Ghanaians, or avoid your fellow. It actually has some form of long-term economic consequences for everyone in the diaspora that nobody is talking about at the moment. So let's look first at the untapped economic power, first of all, of the African diaspora. If you don't understand what I'm trying to say, what are we actually capable of doing as Africans in the diaspora? So according to the World Bank in 2023, Africans, in diaspora sent over $95 billion in remittances last year. That's roughly equal to 4% of Africa's total GDP. So Nigeria alone received $20.1 billion, the highest in sub-Saharan Africa, representing about 6% of Nigeria's GDP. So yet, only 10 to 15% of this money goes into productive investments. So you see, the rest supports just short-term consumption. So if you compare that to the Indian diaspora, which remits $125 billion, they remitted this around 2023, according to the World Bank, but also channels billions into tech startups, venture capital, and diaspora bonds. Using this to help India attract over $83 billion in FDI that same year. So you'll be wondering, what's the cause of this disparity? So why do collective wealth, amongst Africans remain very limited? Data shows that African origin households in the UK, the US and Canada have median net wealth of about 60 to 80%, that is lower than Asian or European immigrant groups. The McKinsey Global Institute in 2022 estimates that while Africans abroad have a combined annual income, exceeding $200 billion, less than 5% of that money is pulled into community funds or cooperatives. Like, where are all the money going and why? Because of these fragmented identities like Nigeria, Ghana, Somali, Ethiopian, because of all these major different ethnic identities that we all have from different parts of Africa, there is limited international coordination amongst the Black population. Community trust is very low as well. If you see in 2021, the African Development Bank study found that only 23% of diasporan respondents, do you understand, will invest in Africa-based cooperative without government backing. Only 23%. So looking at this, you're wondering, why will African community not actually be limited? Let's look at immigration, especially as a policy tool. So you see, across Western economies, immigration fuels labor shortages and sustains aging populations. Whether you like it or not, that is the reality. In the UK, for example, migrants contribute an estimated £100 billion annually in taxes. In the US, immigrants account for 17% of the labor force, and this generates about $2 trillion in GDP. This is according to Brookings in 2022. Yet, Africans are often channeled into lower paying sectors like the healthcare, logistics, and services, and these too with limited access to business law. So, immigration policies classify us as individuals, not as economic blocks, reinforcing fragmentation instead of community empowerment. So you see, with this, you're wondering what is actually the cost of this disunity amongst the African community. So if just 10% of African remittances were pulled annually into investment vehicles, that would create 9.5 billion, that would have been enough, to capitalize and multiply, you know, any money that Africans have and could collectively come together and could be in form of a development bank or a seed for thousands of diasporan backups. Okay, but without such structures, the diaspora money circulates outward. If you look at a 2023 IMF report, it found that up to 30% of remittance inflows leak back to Western economies through import consumption and service fees. And the result here is, Africa would export people, but import goods. And in the midst of all of this, you lose wealth in both directions. Right. So what lessons can we learn from other community? So Chinese migrants created Chinatowns that doubled as business ecosystems. Indian diaspora builds rotating credit associations and diaspora bonds, like India's 1998 resurgent Indian bonds, that raised about $4.2 billion in just 2 weeks. And you see, the Jewish and the Lebanese diasporas also use endowments and family networks to fund education and enterprise. So each of these, different communities have built institutional trust. But the missing link is that Africa is not able to come together with its communities abroad. Okay? And what would be the way forward in this kind of situation? How do we break the jinx and Africans are able to build collective wealth? What would be the way forward? I would say that the part isn't about blaming individuals. It will be more about designing, when you creating system, you design something that will be like a system where diaspora cooperatives, can pool money for savings. Do you understand? There will be credit unions and investment clubs, and these will be registered under Western law. There will be diaspora bonds linked to transparent African infrastructure projects, mentorship networks connecting professionals to African entrepreneurs. And I think it's possible because if Africans abroad mobilize just 5% of their collective income, that's over $10 billion a year. And we can shift from survival to actual influence. In summary, this is what I would say. The evidence is clear. The African diaspora has the numbers, the income, and also the talent, but definitely not the structure. So until we build economic unity, we will keep generating wealth we don't own and also wealth that we can't influence or we can't use. If you read the other day in the news, the numbers of houses that have not been claimed by Nigerians abroad who have died is very high, and everything goes back to some form of I don't want to mention what it is. But this kind of situation is because there's a lack of structure and lack of community that is based on trust, where we can actually build collective wealth that can model the kind of wealth circulating amongst the Chinese, the Lebanese, and the Asians. What would I say is that Africans in diaspora can support each other economically and even beyond remittances. Just start from supporting each other's businesses, sharing ideas, sharing information, remember integrity even in dealings. And I think those little things I have mentioned can start reshaping the kind of society we live in, where competition is not just based on material possession, but actually competition is structured towards another community. When I say another community, you are trying to replicate the wealth and the successes that you have seen in other communities rather than thinking your sister or your brother is your problem. So share your thoughts in the comment section. Subscribe for more discussions and insight from me. And also welcome again to all our new subscribers. I am excited to have you on board. I can't wait to read from you. Type your suggestions, your comments, be part of this conversation, and also share. Let me know what you think. See you again next time.